The umpires didn't hesitate. They didn't call a meeting. They didn't huddle together to discuss what they had just witnessed. They made the decision immediately. And the moment that decision was announced, the entire stadium erupted. Because what the Rockies pitcher had just done to Shohei Ohtani wasn't just gamesmanship. It wasn't just trying to get inside a hitter's head or working the edges of acceptable competition. It was disgraceful. It was behavior so far beyond the boundaries of respect and sportsmanship that even the umpires, who are trained to let players compete and stay out of the way unless absolutely necessary, couldn't allow it to continue. The ejection was swift. The pitcher didn't even get a warning. One moment he was standing on the mound, smirking in a way that made everyone watching feel uncomfortable. The next moment the home plate umpire was pointing toward the dugout, arm extended, making it clear that this pitcher's night was over. And the stunning part wasn't just that he was ejected. It was what led to that ejection. It was the sequence of events that unfolded over the course of a single at-bat that exposed the kind of disgraceful behavior that has no place in professional baseball. It started the moment Ohtani stepped into the batter's box. The Rockies pitcher, whose name will now be remembered for all the wrong reasons, wasn't just preparing to face one of the best hitters in baseball. He was preparing to make a statement. And that statement had nothing to do with pitching. Ohtani took his stance. He dug his back foot into the dirt. He settled into his routine, the same routine he's used thousands of times before. And as he did, the pitcher started talking. Not the usual banter. Not the competitive chatter that happens between pitchers and hitters. This was different. This was personal. This was targeted. The broadcast microphones didn't pick up every word, but they picked up enough. Enough for viewers at home to hear the tone. Enough for the announcers to pause mid-sentence, caught off guard by what they were hearing. Enough for Ohtani to look up from his stance, not with anger, but with something closer to confusion. As if he couldn't quite believe what was being said to him. The first pitch came in high and tight. Not dangerously inside, but close enough to send a message. Close enough to make Ohtani step back. Close enough to make the catcher stand up and look out at his pitcher as if asking, "What are you doing?" But the pitcher just smiled. That smirk again. The kind of smirk that says he knows exactly what he's doing and he's enjoying it. Ohtani reset. He stepped back into the box. He was calm. He always is. But you could see something shift in his body language. A slight tension. A recognition that this at-bat wasn't going to be a normal one. The second pitch was even worse. Not in terms of location, but in terms of what came with it. As the pitcher released the ball, he said something. Loudly. Deliberately. And this time the cameras caught Ohtani's reaction. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. He didn't respond verbally, but everyone in that stadium knew something had crossed a line. The home plate umpire stepped out from behind the plate. He walked halfway toward the mound, mask still on, and issued a warning. A clear, direct warning that whatever was being said needed to stop immediately. The Rockies pitcher held up his hands in mock innocence. As if he had no idea what the umpire was talking about. As if he was just out there trying to compete and the umpire was being overly sensitive. But the umpire wasn't buying it. He pointed at the pitcher. He said something short and firm. And then he walked back behind the plate. The message was clear. One more incident and there would be consequences. The stadium was buzzing now. Fans were on their feet. Some were booing the Rockies pitcher. Some were chanting Ohtani's name. The announcers were trying to piece together what had been said, replaying the footage, analyzing body language, speculating about what could possibly have been bad enough to draw a warning from an umpire in the middle of an at-bat. And then came the third pitch. The pitch that ended everything. As the Rockies pitcher went into his windup, he did something that shocked everyone watching. He stopped. Mid-delivery, he stopped, stepped off the rubber, and walked toward home plate. Not all the way, but far enough that the intent was unmistakable. He was trying to intimidate Ohtani. He was trying to create a confrontation. He was abandoning any pretense of actually pitching and turning this at-bat into a spectacle. Into a moment that had nothing to do with baseball and everything to do with ego and disrespect. The home plate umpire didn't give him a chance to say another word. The arm went up. The ejection was immediate. And the Rockies pitcher, standing on the mound with his mouth open in fake disbelief, had just become the center of one of the most disgraceful moments of the season. The Rockies manager came storming out of the dugout. He was shouting before he even reached the umpire. Demanding an explanation. Demanding to know why his pitcher was being thrown out of the game. The umpire didn't engage in a long debate. He pointed toward the dugout. He made it clear that the decision was final. And then he said something that the lip readers watching at home would later confirm. He crossed the line. He's done. The manager kept arguing, but his heart wasn't in it. Because deep down, he knew. Everyone in that stadium knew. What the pitcher had done wasn't defensible. It wasn't the kind of competitive fire that managers protect. It was behavior that embarrassed the organization, embarrassed the sport, and put a spotlight on everything ugly about the way some players treat superstars like Ohtani. As the pitcher walked off the mound, he didn't hang his head. He didn't show remorse. He waved to the crowd. He smiled. He acted like he had just done something heroic instead of something disgraceful. And that reaction made it worse. Because it showed that this wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This wasn't a player getting caught up in the heat of competition and saying something he'd regret later. This was intentional. This was planned. This was a pitcher who decided before the game even started that he was going to go after Ohtani in a way that had nothing to do with baseball. The Dodgers' dugout was livid. Players were shouting. Coaches were holding them back. Because if the umpires hadn't acted, if that pitcher had been allowed to continue, there's no question that the Dodgers would have taken matters into their own hands. And this game would have descended into chaos. Ohtani, standing in the batter's box through all of this, remained impossibly calm. He didn't charge the mound. He didn't yell at the pitcher as he walked off. He didn't make gestures or try to escalate the situation. He just stood there, bat resting on his shoulder, waiting for the next pitcher to come in so he could continue his at-bat. That composure, that refusal to give the Rockies pitcher the satisfaction of a reaction, was more powerful than anything Ohtani could have said or done. It showed a level of maturity and professionalism that made the contrast between him and the ejected pitcher even more stark. One player was there to play baseball at the highest level. The other was there to make a scene. And the umpires made sure everyone knew which type of behavior would be tolerated and which wouldn't. The replacement pitcher jogged in from the bullpen. He looked uncomfortable. This wasn't the situation any reliever wants to enter. The tension was sky-high. The crowd was restless. And he was being asked to face Shohei Ohtani in an at-bat that had already become one of the most talked-about moments of the night. He threw his warm-up pitches quickly. He didn't make eye contact with Ohtani. He just wanted to get through this and move on. When play resumed, Ohtani stepped back into the box. He took a deep breath. He settled into his stance. And on the very first pitch from the new pitcher, he did what Shohei Ohtani does. He swung. The sound of the bat meeting the ball was pure. Clean. Undeniable. The ball rocketed into the left field seats. A home run. The stadium exploded. It was the perfect response. Not words. Not gestures. Just performance. Just a reminder that no amount of disrespect, no amount of attempts to throw him off his game, would stop Ohtani from being exactly who he is. The best player in baseball. As Ohtani rounded the bases, the camera cut to the Rockies' dugout. Some players were shaking their heads. Some looked embarrassed. The manager was staring at the ground. Because in that moment, the entire Rockies organization had to face the reality of what their pitcher's behavior had cost them. Not just an ejection. Not just the embarrassment of a player being thrown out for acting like a fool. But a home run. A momentum shift. A moment that would be replayed on highlight reels for years as an example of what happens when you try to intimidate Shohei Ohtani instead of just pitching to him. The press conference after the game was intense. Reporters wanted answers. They wanted to know exactly what the Rockies pitcher had said to Ohtani. They wanted to know if the league would take further action. They wanted to know how the Dodgers felt about the incident and whether it would affect the rest of the series. Dave Roberts spoke first. His voice was calm, but the anger underneath was unmistakable. He talked about how Ohtani handles himself with class and dignity every single night. About how he's a model for how the game should be played. And about how what the Rockies pitcher did was the exact opposite of that. Roberts didn't call for additional punishment. He didn't need to. He simply said that the umpires made the right decision and that the baseball world saw exactly what kind of player that Rockies pitcher is. When Ohtani sat down in front of the microphones, the room went silent. Everyone wanted to hear what he would say. Whether he would reveal what had been said to him. Whether he would criticize the Rockies pitcher or take the high road. Ohtani chose the high road. He said that what happened on the field stays on the field. That he doesn't let words affect his performance. That he's focused on helping his team win and that's all that matters. But then a reporter asked him directly. Do you think the umpires made the right decision ejecting him? Ohtani paused. He looked at the reporter. And then he said something that captured the entire moment perfectly. Yes. Because baseball is about respect. And what he did had nothing to do with baseball. That answer said everything. It confirmed that what the pitcher had done was beyond the pale. It validated the umpire's decision. And it reminded everyone watching that Ohtani's greatness isn't just about his talent. It's about his character. The league's response came the next day. The Rockies pitcher was suspended for 5 games. Fined an undisclosed amount. And required to issue a public apology. The statement from the commissioner's office was clear. The behavior displayed toward Shohei Ohtani was unacceptable and would not be tolerated. Players are expected to compete with intensity, but there are lines that cannot be crossed. Those lines include personal attacks, intimidation tactics that go beyond the scope of the game, and conduct that brings disrepute to the sport. The Rockies organization issued their own statement. They said they were disappointed in their player's actions and that his behavior did not reflect the values of the franchise. But the damage was done. The video had gone viral. The story had been told. And now, whenever anyone talks about that Rockies pitcher, this moment will be part of the conversation. Not his stats. Not his potential. But the night he got ejected for disgraceful behavior toward Shohei Ohtani. Inside the Dodgers clubhouse, the incident brought the team even closer together. Because what they saw that night was one of their own being disrespected in a way that went beyond competition. And they saw how Ohtani responded. Not with anger. Not with retaliation. But with performance. With a home run that silenced the disrespect and reminded everyone why he's the best. Mookie Betts talked about it in an interview later that week. He said that watching Ohtani handle that situation with such grace made him proud to be his teammate. That it set a standard for how the entire team should carry themselves. Freddie Freeman echoed those sentiments. He said that Ohtani could have escalated the situation, could have turned it into a brawl, but instead he turned it into a teaching moment. A reminder that the best revenge is success. The umpire's stunning decision to eject the Rockies pitcher immediately became one of the most talked about officiating moments of the season. Some analysts praised it as a necessary stand against behavior that was poisoning the game. Others debated whether it was too harsh, whether a warning should have been enough. But the overwhelming consensus was that the umpires got it right. Because if they hadn't acted, if they had let that behavior continue, it would have sent a message to every player in baseball that targeting superstars with personal attacks is acceptable. And that's a message the game cannot afford to send. The umpires saw something that crossed the line and they acted decisively. And in doing so, they protected not just Ohtani, but the integrity of the sport itself. The disgraceful behavior was exposed. The stunning decision was made. And Shohei Ohtani, as always, let his performance do the talking.